fun to talk about the Jets right now with the way they're rolling, but when we get to pick the big brain of one of our favorites, Mike Kelly, it's a perfect storm right now, much like this first half of the season's been for the Jets. Mike Kelly of the NHL Network joins us now. Mike, what's going on? Happy New Year. It's great to have you back on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Hey, thanks, Andrew. Happy to be back. And I thought I'd just kick the standings up behind me for no particular reason today. Jets fans, got to like what you see.
You got to love it. Listen, it's been real fun. And I guess it was after the game on Friday, heading into Saturday, where the Jets were going to be off. But, they got that win to put them into first overall. They had a day off. They were all golfing with their dads and mentors on the trip. And I can tell you personally, I probably had 20 people just fire into my text, just a screen cap of the standings. This has not happened before. And we're approaching the midway point of the season. And this team, night after night, proves that they can hang with anyone and beat anyone. That's exactly what they've been doing for the last couple months. Mike, from your perspective, how impressed are you with the Jets? And at what point did you become kind of onto the fact that, holy smokes, this isn't just a good team, but this is one of the best in the league as demonstrated in the NHL standings?
Well, I had some of those thoughts a year ago. This time a year ago, Winnipeg was well over 600 in points percentage. They were fifth in the league, and they looked really good. And things in the second half really slid for them, right? They went 20 wins, 20 losses, 2 overtime losses in the last 42 games, played 500 the rest of the way. And the frustrating thing was you're watching them last year, and it just seems like they got out of the system that works so well for them and how they play. Because they were a good team. And I still thought going into the playoffs, I'm like, it would be an upset, but there are always a couple in the first round. I thought Winnipeg could beat Vegas, and they didn't. This iteration of the team, when it does play to its identity, when it is fully invested in the way that Rick Bowness and the coaching staff want it to play, they're really hard to beat. And so we're seeing it again. And it's been great. Towards the end of Paul Maurice's tenure here, the Jets, they could score. They gave up a ton of chances, and Hellebuck was a hero, right, to try to keep them in games and win them games. You're not seeing that anymore. You're still seeing very good Connor Hellebuck, really good, but also really good team defense. And you put those two things together, there's no 4, 5, or 6 spots against in 29 games in a row now. It's crazy.
You've got a great bit on the fourth line. We've been talking about them. We'll get to that in a minute. But just preseason, going in, you buy out Wheeler, you trade Dubois, bring in Velarde, bring in Iafallo, bring in Kupari. You know that Nino and Nemestikov is re-signed. Nino was coming back for another year, has since been re-signed. What were your thoughts on just how significantly the Jets changed their roster as far as the pieces go, before we talk about the credit the coaching staff deserves for getting what they're getting out of this team night in and night out?
Yeah, well, I give a lot of credit to Kevin Cheveldayoff and the job the front office did, because they were put in some unenviable positions where, there's leverage that's not to be had just based on the way that some of these things went and the people that left. When the return that they got, I thought, for Dubois, Gabe Velarde was every year at the NHL Network in the summer, we do an analytics show and I pick a breakout player of the year. And I picked Gabe Velarde this year. That was such a good get, I thought, because he didn't fit in LA's top 6. And he was just somebody, when you look at rates, per 20 minutes of ice time, what are they doing? So good around the net, great hands around the net. You look at where he scores all his goals this year. They're all from the far post. And he's been really, really good for them, showing that he can play in the top 6. He can play on a top line and be productive. Iafallo is a good player, kind of Swiss Army knife type player. Kupari, you mentioned. Right now, those guys collectively, no question, are better than what went out. So, and that's a credit to the GM and the front office for making that happen and getting the right players back. That's helped this team be really well-rounded.
A great crowd in here, folks. If you're new, welcome to a Winnipeg Sports Talk. We're here every day live on YouTube at 1. You can find the podcast wherever you get your favorite pods. Just search Winnipeg Sports Talk and subscribe. And if you're with us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and make sure to give a thumbs up. Listen, we've said this over and over again. I was just going through the numbers, and we've talked about this incredible stretch of 29 games or something like that, where they've given up 3 or less. If you dive in even more, since the beginning of December, Mike, they've given up 3 goals once, and it was a power play goal in overtime. I mean, in regulation, they have not given up 3 goals in any game dating back to a 3-1 loss to Edmonton, which ironically, they were up 1-0 with 5 minutes left in the game. When you watch the Winnipeg Jets, what do you see as far as the style of play and the consistency that they've been able to do the same thing over and over again? And, how much credit does Scott Arniel and head coach Rick Bowness and the rest of the staff deserve with what they're getting out of the Winnipeg Jets night in and night out? Because to me, we've seen the Jets play at a really high level before, but I've never seen a team do this repeatedly over and over and over again. And as I said, it's showing when you look up at the standings.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail there, Andrew, when you talk about the most impressive thing is probably the consistency of it. Like, to do that every night is remarkable in an 82-game season when we're getting into the middle of it right now, right? That's so impressive. Like, what they give up. I mean, I can read you a couple things. So they're leading the league right now on goals against average. They're 5th in expected goals against. So it shows you great goaltending, but also great team defense. They give up the 3rd fewest shots from the slot. They give up the 2nd fewest chances off the rush. They're top 10 in cycle chances against. Like, all these meaningful areas where teams can produce offense sustainably at a higher rate, they don't give those up. And that's team. It's not just defense. It's certainly not just goaltending. It's forwards too. And Paul Maurice was here towards the end. They played a little different in their own end. It was more of a man-on-man coverage, and it's more of kind of a hybrid zone coverage now. That you need buy-in from everybody on the ice to make that work. Everybody's got to be on the same page, be connected, and they are. So I give them a lot of credit. Watch how often this team plays where the camera goes up and down the ice, and you see 4, if not 5 guys in the same camera shot. Like, they're a very connected team that way. So again, you go back to a year ago, and at this time a year ago, I'm like, this team playing like this is a Stanley Cup contender. And then it dropped. And I don't know why. I'm not obviously in the room, and I'm not even in the market, why the players got away from it or how it broke down. But if they play this way, and not even every night, like, there's no way they're going the rest of the year giving up 2 goals or less, or even 3 goals or less every game. But if they just play this way most of the time and keep it going to the postseason, they've got as good a shot as anybody at winning a cup, because they've got the right pieces.
Well, and on top of it, a team that plays the way they're playing with the goalie that they have, and I'll include Laurent Brossoit. I mean, he didn't have a great start, neither did Hellebuck, to be perfectly honest, if you look back at October.
Yeah.
But I mean, since then, with a couple very small exceptions, both of these guys have been playing incredibly well, putting up big numbers. But back to your original point, I mean, Hellebuck won the Vezina because the Jets gave him plenty of opportunity night after night to show what an incredible goalie he was because of the chances they were giving up. Like, the netminders of the Winnipeg Jets are benefiting in a big, big way from the way the team's playing in front of them, and the numbers will dictate that as well.
Absolutely. Like, you brought up December 1st, right? And I was just looking at this earlier today. Since December 1st, Brossoit's numbers, like, you get into the advanced stuff, actually slightly better than Hellebuck's. Like, he's been as good, right? You could certainly argue that. Good for him. He gets the credit for that. But again, we're talking about the team in front of these guys as well that have really helped their goaltenders. And Hellebuck's talked about how he likes to play a lot. Like, he feels best when he's in a rhythm of playing a lot. If that's what works for him, and I talked to him at the All-Star game at the awards in Nashville about this. He said that he prepares his body to play a lot, and that's what he likes. That's when he feels he's at his best. So if he's going to play a lot, and you obviously want him to be rested and feeling good going into the postseason, the next best thing you can do is not have him make 40 saves a night and 30, grade A saves a night. And that's what they're doing. So it's everything right now is really good. Also, it's like, this has got to be about as good as it can get, right? The Jets are going to go through some kind of funk at some point this year. They're going to lose a couple games in a row, and it's not the end of the world. But if you're a Jets fan, man, the last couple months watching this team, you got every right to say to any other fan base, look, we're right there with you.
No, there's no doubt about it. And just back to Helly for a minute. You mentioned how much he likes to play, and there's no doubt about that. But you do have to be smart. You need to get your backup goaltender in there, and Brossoit is giving them every reason to have full confidence in playing him. If they can continue somewhat this level of consistency, and I'm with you, the team's going to lose a couple games at some point. What they will avoid, Mike, is the situation they were in at the end of last year, where they bottomed out for 6 to 8 weeks, and all of a sudden they went from being a top team to being like scratching and clawing for their playoff lives. And the playoffs basically started for the Jets in March.
Yeah.
And Hellebuck played the last 13 games of the season until they finally clinched in Minnesota. The way that this team has played, and frankly what they've earned to this point, should put them in a situation where they won't be in a desperate run to make it, and Hellebuck won't have to play that much. And I would imagine, like, this is just my inkling, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, there's different levels of rest. And like, resting a guy in November, does that matter as much in April? I'm not sure. But giving a guy the proper rest down the stretch in the final 20 games, I would imagine probably has more of an impact on your readiness for the postseason.
Well, I can only reference my career as a Pee Wee B goaltender, and how I handled my rest. I think you're probably right. I mean, that stands to reason that you'd be right about that. And it's a great point you bring up about how they got in last year and how much they had to ride him just to get in. And they were playing hard games for so long. So if you can go in this time around, maybe you're still battling for top spot in the division or the conference or the league or whatever, and it's meaningful still, but that you can cut those games up and not have to scratch and claw, like you said. That's great. And the other thing too is, like, when you look at the standings, so like the top 3 in the Central, the top 3 in the Pacific are all really good teams. And there's going to be another team, I think, in the Pacific, whether it's Vancouver, Vegas, LA, Edmonton, like one of those teams is not finishing top 3. That is a very good team. When you get to that last wild card spot, you're talking about Nashville, St. Louis, Seattle, Arizona, Calgary, whatever. That's a favorable matchup compared to the rest of it if you can win your division and win the conference. So there is still stuff to play for, obviously. And the Jets, it's not going to be a cakewalk for them to be the best team in the West. But man, that's what I'm interested to see now. Like, we saw them do something not quite as good, but similar to this point last year. Can they maintain that going forward here? But a lot to like.
Well, and one of the other things that's fascinating about this team, is that, for a while, like, Kyle Connor goes out, Velarde moves up to that line, and they become the hottest line in the league and go on an absolute tear for 5 or 6 games. Well, they went through a funk for about 4 games where they weren't scoring. And all of a sudden it's Perfetti, and it's Iafallo, and it's Adam Lowry. But Mike, and you put this out, by the way, give Mike a follow at Mike Kelly NHL, and you can see this graphic for yourself. The 4th line has been phenomenal. And Dominic Toninato and Axel Jonsson-Fjällby both were Manitoba Moose to start the year. I mean, they're here right now because David Gustafsson got hurt and Rasmus Kapari got hurt. You sort of laid out the numbers, but just how good has this Barron, Toninato, Jonsson-Fjällby line been by the numbers? Because they've certainly looked good from the eye test.
Yeah, they've been exceptional. There you go. So this is, in the minutes they played together, obviously Toninato comes up just after Christmas, and that's been the 4th line. I'll give credit, though, because, Barron and Jonsson-Fjällby before, the 4th line before was good. This is next level
having a great
stuff.
season too.
Yeah, for sure. This is next level stuff when you look at, like, to give you some context on this. And again, it's 46 minutes, right? Like, let's see after 100, 200, whatever. It's a bit of a small sample, but a really good line is going to have an expected goals percentage of about 60%, maybe 65, like over the course of a whole year. To be at 88%, even in the small sample, that's all we can judge them on, is exceptional. And look at the inner slot shots. Like their opponents don't have one in 46 minutes. forget what you do offensively. Like if the goals said 0 and the inner slot shots for Winnipeg's line here said 0, to have zeros on the other side for a fourth line in 46 minutes, that's a win. Like I can't think of a coach that wouldn't take that. The fact that they're doing it offensively as well is just adds to it. I mean, man, you can't play much better than that in the handful of games they've been together at this point.
Well, and it's funny. I mean, I'll kind of compare that to, the Jet defense core. And I mean, that was an area that I think most people looked at this team and said, well, if they need to improve, they're pretty deep at forward. They've got great goaltending, but is the defense good enough? And I'm sure the way that the team is played together has a big part in this. But I mean, I was looking at the defensive metrics for goals against, and Dylan Samberg and Nate Schmidt, the Jets' third pair, obviously being used in third pairing minutes, has been at the top of that list literally all season long. And all of a sudden, Brendan Dillon and Neil Pionk's group is now into the top 10 as there. And we certainly know what the Morrissey and DeMello pairing has done so far this season. Like, all of a sudden, the Jet blue liners are getting some pretty impressive numbers, and it's all part of a bigger package where the sum truly is greater than the parts.
Yeah, no question. The top pairing and the second pair kind of eat somewhat comparable strength of opposition, and the top pairing's been really, really good. Second pair, Dylan and Pionk have been pretty good, and you're right, that third pair. Again, they're not getting the heavy lifting, but they're a third pair. Who cares? They've been outstanding in the minutes that they've had. Like we've seen the fourth line recently has been outstanding in the minutes that they've had. We know about Winnipeg's, I'd say top D pair and their top 6, put them up against just about anybody. Then you start to get what we're seeing from the depth, like we've shown in the last couple minutes here. It's a great recipe. But well, I'm with you. When you look at that blue line on paper, you think like, okay, like should be all right, but not, unbelievable. Again, that's where you give them credit for how well they play, but also to the team as a whole for the way that the forwards help the defense in defending, the way that they play as a group, the way that the goaltenders will clean up any breakdowns that are happening. Like it's just all connected to each other, which is great because I think if you have a line that goes cold, like you mentioned for a little bit, you can move guys around. If you have a deep pairing that goes cold, you got so many other areas where you can pick it up. You're not reliant on a line or a deep pairing or a goalie to save your butt, night in and night out.